Love is blind, but cruelty is loud. When a rising corporate lawyer brutally dumped his plus-size girlfriend in a crowded five-star restaurant, he thought he was upgrading his life. He didn't realize the quiet man in the next booth was Chicago's most feared syndicate boss, and he hated bullies. Lily Henderson adjusted the collar of her bespoke black blazer, smoothing her hands down the curve of her hips. At 28, Lily was a brilliant, highly sought-after general manager at Le Petit Diamant, one of the most exclusive Michelin-starred restaurants on Chicago's Magnificent Mile. She was sharp, witty, and possessed a palate that could identify a counterfeit Bordeaux with a single sip. She was also undeniably and noticeably fat. It was a word she had spent her life trying to reclaim, though society rarely let her forget it. At 260 pounds, Lily carried her weight with a forced confidence, masking the deep-seated insecurities that her boyfriend of 4 years, Bradford Carter, had expertly weaponized. Brad was a junior partner at Donahue, and Briggs a cutthroat corporate law firm. He was devastatingly handsome, perpetually clad in tailored Brioni suits, and wore his narcissism like a second skin. For 4 years, Brad had subtly and overtly reminded Lily how lucky she was to have a man like him. "Most guys in my circle wouldn't be seen with a big girl, Lily," he would whisper after a fight, cloaking his toxicity in faux devotion. "But I see past the weight. You're lucky I'm not superficial." Tonight was their 4th anniversary. Lily had pulled every string to secure the chef's table, a private alcove draped in heavy velvet curtains overlooking the Chicago skyline. She had purchased him a vintage Patek Philippe watch, spending 3 months of her savings to show her appreciation. At 8 p.m., the mahogany doors of the restaurant opened. Lily's smile brightened until she saw him. Brad didn't walk in alone. His fingers were firmly laced with those of a petite, size 2 blonde woman in a skin-tight silk dress. She had the kind of sharp, angular features that graced the covers of fashion magazines, and she was giggling at something Brad had said. Lily felt the floor drop out from beneath her. The bustling sounds of clinking crystal and jazz piano faded into a dull roar. She stepped out from behind the mahogany host stand, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Brad?" Lily's voice was remarkably steady, though her hands trembled. Brad froze. The smug smile slid off his face, quickly replaced by a cold, calculating annoyance. He didn't drop the blonde's hand. Instead, he sighed heavily, the sound reeking of inconvenience. "Lily, I didn't think you were working the floor tonight. I thought you'd be in the back office," Brad said smoothly, glancing around to ensure no high-profile clients were watching him. "It's our anniversary," Lily whispered, stepping closer. The blonde woman looked Lily up and down, a slow, mocking smirk playing on her lips. "Brad, is this the manager you told me about?" The blonde asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "Savannah, give us a second," Brad muttered. He stepped forward, invading Lily's space, trying to use his height to intimidate her. "Look, Lily, let's not make a scene. I was going to come by your apartment tomorrow and pack up my things. It's over." "Over." Lily choked out the humiliation burning her cheeks. "You bring another woman to my restaurant on the night I planned for us, and you tell me it's over. Don't play the victim." Brad hissed, his true colors bleeding through his polished veneer. "I got promoted today. I'm a senior partner now. I have client dinners, galas, charity balls. I need someone who looks the part on my arm." "I have stood by you for 4 years," Lily argued, her voice rising just enough to catch the attention of the adjacent booth. "I paid your rent when you were studying for the bar. I bought your first suit." Brad's eyes darkened with cruelty. He leaned in his words designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. And I paid my debt by pretending to be attracted to you. Look at yourself, Lily. You're embarrassing me. Nobody wants a fat girl. I stayed out of pity, but I have a reputation to maintain now. Savannah is a former Miss Illinois. You are a glorified waitress who needs 2 airline seats. Grow up and accept reality. Tears pricked Lily's eyes, but a sudden terrifying wave of rage held them back. The silence that followed his brutal declaration was deafening. Neither Brad nor Lily noticed that the heavy velvet curtain of the adjacent VIP booth table 5 had been pulled back a fraction of an inch. Sitting in the shadows was Julian Moretti. Julian, known to the underground as Enzo, was the head of the Moretti Syndicate, a ruthless empire that controlled shipping real estate and less savory operations across the Midwest. He was a man carved from marble and violence, with eyes the color of a winter ocean and a tailored 3-piece suit that hid a holster. He was conducting a quiet meeting with his underboss, but his attention had been entirely hijacked by the scene unfolding inches from his table. Enzo despised many things: Traitor's bad espresso, and above all, men who punched down. He watched as the heavy-set woman who had elegantly recommended his Barolo wine just 20 minutes prior absorbed the devastating blow of her ex's words. He saw the tremor in her hands, but more importantly, he saw the fiery dignity in her dark eyes. She didn't crumble. Lily took a deep, shuddering breath. She straightened her spine, looking Brad dead in the eye. "Get out of my restaurant, Mr. Carter, before I have security throw you out." Brad scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Gladly. This place is overpriced anyway." He turned on his heel, wrapping an arm around Savannah's narrow waist, and strode out the door. Lily stood frozen for exactly 5 seconds. Then she smoothed her blazer, plastered a flawless, albeit tight smile on her face, and turned back to the dining room. As she walked past table 5, a low, gravelly voice stopped her. "Miss Henderson." Lily paused, turning to see the imposing figure of Julian Moretti stepping out from the shadows of his booth. She knew exactly who he was. Every GM in the city knew the Moretti family. You didn't cross them, you didn't bill them, and you certainly didn't make them wait. "Mr. Moretti," Lily said, her voice betraying a slight wobble. "Is there an issue with your meal? I can have the chef." "The meal is impeccable," Enzo interrupted smoothly, his tall, broad frame towering over her. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, withdrawing a sleek black business card with gold-embossed lettering. He handed it to her. His fingers brushed hers, warm and rough with calluses. "I am a businessman, Miss Henderson. I evaluate assets, and I just watched a man throw away a diamond because he was too stupid to know its worth." Enzo's dark eyes locked onto hers, entirely devoid of pity, filled instead with a dangerous intrigue. "Bradford Carter, you said, from Donahue and Briggs." Lily swallowed hard, clutching the card. "Yes, good," Enzo murmured, a predatory smile touching the corner of his lips. "Take tomorrow off. Call that number at noon. I have a proposition for you, one that involves a very lucrative career change and a very public funeral for Mr. Carter's new reputation." The next morning, the Chicago sky was overcast, reflecting the hollow ache in Lily's chest. She sat on her velvet sofa, a half-empty mug of black coffee in her hands, staring at the black business card resting on her glass coffee table. Julian Moretti, CEO, Moretti Enterprises. She had spent the entire night crying, mourning not the loss of Brad, but the 4 years she had wasted believing she was unworthy of anything better. His words, "Nobody wants a fat girl," echoed in her mind, a venomous loop. But every time the tears threatened to fall again, the memory of Enzo Moretti's cold, calculating eyes replaced them. He hadn't looked at her with pity. He had looked at her like she was a weapon he wanted to wield. At exactly 11:59 a.m., Lily picked up her phone and dialed the number. It was answered on the first ring. "Miss Henderson." Enzo's deep voice resonated through the speaker. "My driver is downstairs. Wear something that makes you feel powerful. We have business to discuss." 40 minutes later, Lily stepped out of a tinted Maybach and was escorted into the penthouse of the Moretti Tower. The office was sprawling, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Enzo stood by the glass, pouring a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, revealing a glimpse of dark ink on his collarbone. He turned as she entered, his gaze sweeping over her. Lily had chosen a deep emerald wrap dress that accentuated her curves, paired with sharp black stilettos. She felt exposed, yet oddly shielded. "You look beautiful," Enzo stated. It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of absolute fact. He handed her a tumbler of bourbon. "Sit." Lily sat in the plush leather chair opposite his massive mahogany desk. "Mr. Moretti." "Enzo," he corrected, sitting across from her. "Enzo." She tried the name, feeling dangerously heavy on her tongue. "Why am I here? I am a restaurant manager. You run, well, half the city. If this is out of charity, because of what you saw last night, I don't want it." Enzo let out a low, dark chuckle. "I don't do charity, Lily. I do strategy. Your ex-boyfriend's firm, Donahue and Briggs, handles the escrow accounts and real estate acquisitions for the Volkov Bratva, my direct competitors." Lily's eyes widened. She knew Brad was ambitious, but she didn't know he was swimming in those kinds of waters. "Bradford was just promoted to handle their account," Enzo continued, leaning forward, his forearms resting on his knees. "And that blonde twig he was with, Savannah Chase. Her real name is Svetlana Romanov. She is the niece of the Volkov boss. She isn't dating your ex for his charm. She's using him to ensure Donahue and Briggs funnels their dirty money cleanly into Chicago real estate." Lily felt the air leave her lungs. "Brad is laundering money for the Russian mob. He's about to," Enzo corrected. "He's arrogant, greedy, and easily manipulated. But he's also my way in. I am launching a new hospitality division, high-end luxury hotels. I need a director of operations, someone who knows the industry inside and out, someone with impeccable taste, and someone who knows exactly how Bradford Carter operates." "You want me to help you take him down?" Lily breathed the realization, sending a thrill of pure adrenaline through her veins. "I want to ruin him," Enzo said softly, his gaze dropping to her lips before meeting her eyes again. "He insulted you, but he also insulted my intelligence by being that loud in my favorite restaurant. I want to buy the building his firm leases. I want to freeze their assets. And I want you to be the face of the hostile takeover. I want him to look across the boardroom table and realize the woman he discarded is the one holding the axe." Lily stared at him. For the first time in her life, a man wasn't asking her to shrink. Enzo Moretti was actively demanding she take up space. He didn't see her weight as a liability. He saw her intellect, her pain, and her drive as an asset. "I've never orchestrated a corporate takeover," Lily admitted, her grip tightening on the glass. "You ran a Michelin-starred restaurant, full of temperamental chefs and entitled billionaires. Corporate warfare is practically the same, just with worse food," Enzo replied smoothly. He stood up, walking around the desk to stand beside her chair. He leaned down, his face inches from hers, the scent of bergamot and expensive tobacco wrapping around her senses. "The salary is triple what you make now. You'll have an unlimited wardrobe budget, a corner office, and my full protection." Enzo whispered, his voice dark and hypnotic. "And in exchange, you give me your loyalty, your brilliant mind, and the pleasure of watching you destroy the man who broke your heart." Lily looked up into his eyes. There was danger there, a violent undercurrent that should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel incredibly safe. Brad had told her nobody wanted a fat girl. Yet here was Chicago's most lethal predator, handing her the keys to an empire. She set her bourbon glass down on the desk with a definitive clink. "When do we start?" she asked. Enzo's smile was feral. "We already have. Yesterday I bought his debt. Today we buy his building. Next week we take his dignity. Over the next 6 weeks, the penthouse of the Moretti Tower became Lily's sanctuary and her war room." She traded the grueling physical hours of restaurant management for the cutthroat, adrenaline-fueled world of corporate acquisitions. Enzo Moretti was a demanding mentor, but unlike Bradford, he never spoke down to her. He challenged her intellect, handed her encrypted financial ledgers, and watched with quiet, burning pride as she dismantled them piece by piece. Lily discovered that her meticulously trained eye for inventory shrinkage and vendor discrepancies translated perfectly into forensic accounting. Within a month, she had mapped out the entire money laundering network Brad was setting up for the Volkov Bratva. Brad was using a labyrinth of shell companies, primarily one named Cypress Holdings, to funnel illicit Russian cash into prime Chicago commercial real estate. More importantly, Lily found the fatal flaw in Brad's arrogant design. He had been so eager to impress Svetlana and her Russian uncles that he had tied his own personal credentials and escrow licenses directly to the fraudulent transfers. Svetlana wasn't just using him to wash money. She was setting him up to be the ultimate fall guy if the FBI ever came knocking. "He's a lamb walking into a slaughterhouse," Lily murmured one late Tuesday evening, staring at the projected financial schematics on the glass wall of Enzo's office. She wore a tailored burgundy wrap dress, her bare feet tucked beneath her on the leather sofa. Enzo poured 2 glasses of 20-year-old Macallan, walking over to hand her one. His knuckles brushed against her thigh, sending a familiar electric jolt through her system. "And you feel sorry for him?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "No," Lily said firmly, taking a sip of the smoky liquid. "I feel annoyed that I spent 4 years thinking a man this fundamentally stupid was my intellectual superior." Enzo's lips curved into a wicked smile. "That is the tragedy of arrogant men. They mistake a woman's patience for subservience. Tomorrow night is the annual Donahue and Briggs Partners Gala at the Palmer House, Hilton. It's where they plan to officially sign the Volkov acquisition contracts in the private Monroe boardroom before the party. It is time to drop the guillotine, Maya Regina." The following evening, the grand lobby of the Palmer House Hilton was a sea of glittering chandeliers, frescoed ceilings, and Chicago's elite. Bradford Carter stood near the entrance of the Monroe boardroom, radiating smug self-satisfaction. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, a flute of vintage Dom Perignon in his hand. Clinging to his arm was Svetlana, draped in silver sequins, looking bored, but playing the part of the adoring trophy. Brad had just been introduced to the firm's senior managing partners as the architect of their most lucrative quarter in a decade. He was practically vibrating with ego. "Gentlemen, the Cypress Holdings merger will solidify our firm's dominance in the commercial sector." Brad boasted to a circle of grey-haired executives. "I've personally vetted the investors. It's ironclad. We will need the signature of the building's new primary lien holder before we can proceed, Bradford," cautioned Richard Donahue, the firm's founding partner. A private equity firm quietly bought up the debt on this very property and our own office building 2 days ago. We're waiting on their proxy. Whoever they are, they'll sign, Brad said dismissively. The margins are too good. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. The ambient chatter of the room instantly died down, replaced by a suffocating heavy silence. Standing in the doorway was Lily Henderson. She was a vision of absolute, undeniable power. She wore a custom-made, off-the-shoulder gown in deep emerald green velvet that hugged every lush curve of her body, cascading into a sweeping train. Her dark hair was styled in thick, glamorous waves, and her lips were painted a bold, dangerous crimson. Around her neck rested a necklace of flawless teardrop diamonds, a borrowed piece from the Moretti family vault. She commanded the room effortlessly, not by shrinking, but by expanding into the space she had always deserved. Brad's champagne flute slipped a fraction of an inch in his grasp. The color drained completely from his face. "Lily," he hissed, abandoning his circle of partners to storm toward the door. Svetlana trailed behind him, her perfectly arched eyebrows knitting in confusion. "What the hell are you doing here?" Brad whispered, viciously grabbing her arm. "This is a private, multi-million-dollar corporate event. Did you sneak in through the catering entrance?" Lily didn't flinch. She simply looked down at his hand, gripping her velvet sleeve. "Remove your hand, Bradford, before I have it broken." The icy authority in her voice made him freeze. Before he could react, a massive, impeccably dressed shadow stepped up behind Lily. Julian Moretti emerged from the corridor, his presence immediately sucking the remaining oxygen out of the room. The senior partners of the law firm visibly recoiled, recognizing the mob boss instantly. Enzo didn't look at the partners. He looked at Brad's hand. "I believe the lady gave you an instruction, Mr. Carter," Enzo said softly. The threat of violence in his tone was so palpable it felt like a physical weight in the room. Brad dropped her arm as if it were on fire, stumbling backward. "Mr. Moretti, I don't understand. What are you doing with my ex-girlfriend?" "She is not your ex-girlfriend," Enzo corrected, stepping to Lily's side and resting a possessive heavy hand on the small of her back. "She is the director of operations for Moretti Enterprises, and as of 48 hours ago, she is the proxy for the firm that just bought your building, your firm's debt, and the very ground you are standing on." A collective gasp echoed from the senior partners. Richard Donahue stepped forward, visibly sweating. "Mr. Moretti, Miss Henderson, please come in." Bradford shut the doors. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, sealing Bradford Carter inside a tomb of his own making. Lily walked to the head of the massive mahogany conference table. Enzo pulled out the grand leather chair for her, waiting until she was seated before taking a standing position directly behind her, like a guardian Cerberus. Brad remained standing near the door, his chest heaving, his eyes darting frantically between Lily Enzo and his furious bosses. "Let's skip the pleasantries, gentlemen." Lily began opening a sleek leather dossier she had brought with her. She slid several thick stacks of paper down the length of the table. "You are here to finalize the Cypress Holdings merger spearheaded by Mr. Carter." "Yes, Miss Henderson," Donahue said nervously. "As the new lion holders, we hope you will approve the transaction." "I would rather set my money on fire," Lily said smoothly. She leaned back in her chair, leveling a lethal gaze at Brad. "Because Cypress Holdings is a shell company operated by the Volkov Bratva. Your golden boy Bradford has been orchestrating a massive money laundering scheme." Chaos erupted. The senior partners began shouting frantically, flipping through the documents Lily had provided. The ledgers clearly showed the illicit transfers, the forged escrow documents, and the direct ties to known Russian syndicate accounts. "That's a lie," Brad screamed, his voice cracking with panic. He pointed a trembling finger at Lily. "She's just a bitter, jealous, fat girl I dumped. She's forging this to get back at me." Enzo shifted his weight, his eyes flashing with murderous intent, but Lily held up a single manicured hand, stopping him. She didn't need a savior. She had the sword herself. "Page 42, Mr. Donahue," Lily instructed calmly. "You'll see Bradford's personal digital signature authorizing the transfer of $80 million in cartel cash across state lines. A blatant RICO violation. And if you look closely, you will see that his beautiful companion, Savannah Chase, whose real name is Svetlana Romanov, ensured the money was routed entirely through accounts solely bearing Brad's name." Brad spun around to look at Svetlana, who was suddenly edging toward the door, her facade of the dumb blonde entirely vanished. "Savannah, what is she talking about? You stupid, arrogant pig." Svetlana spat in a thick Russian accent. "You thought I actually wanted you. You were a cheap suit with a law degree and a pathetic ego. My uncle needed a scapegoat. You practically begged for the leash." Brad fell to his knees, the devastating reality crashing down upon him. He had sacrificed the only woman who ever genuinely loved him for a woman who was actively planning his funeral. The FBI received a mirrored copy of that dossier 10 minutes ago. Lily announced the final nail in the coffin. "Moretti Enterprises has also frozen the $80 million mid-transfer. The Volkovs do not have their clean real estate, and they do not have their dirty money, and they know exactly who lost it." Brad scrambled forward on his knees, crawling toward Lily's chair. Tears streamed down his perfectly bronzed face, ruining his expensive facade. "Lily, please, please, they'll kill me. You have to help me. You know I didn't mean to do this. We were in love. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm so sorry." Lily looked down at the man she had once centered her entire universe around. He looked so small, so utterly pathetic. "You told me nobody wants a fat girl." "Brad?" Lily said, her voice echoing with chilling finality in the silent room. "But, as it turns out, nobody wants a cowardly, broke, unemployed felon on the run from the Russian mob." She stood up, smoothing the velvet of her dress. "Mr. Donahue, if Bradford Carter is still on your premises when the FBI arrives in 10 minutes, Moretti Enterprises will ensure your firm goes down with him. Have a pleasant evening." Lily turned and walked toward the door. Svetlana had already slipped away into the night, leaving Brad weeping on the expensive carpet as his former bosses began screaming for security. As they walked out into the cool, crisp Chicago night air, away from the flashing red and blue sirens pulling up to the hotel entrance, Enzo guided Lily toward his waiting car. He didn't open the door immediately. Instead, he pinned her gently against the sleek, black metal of the Maybach, his large hands coming to rest on her waist, pulling her flush against his chest. "You were terrifying in there," Enzo murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. "Brilliant. Ruthless. Absolutely breathtaking." Lily looked up into his eyes, her heart hammering, not from fear, but from a profound, electrifying liberation. She didn't feel the need to hide her body, to shrink her presence, or to apologize for the space she took up. "I had a good teacher," she whispered. "I didn't teach you how to be a queen, Lily." Enzo replied, his thumbs gently tracing the curves of her hips, sending a shiver down her spine. "I just handed you a crown that was already yours. Brad was a blind fool who couldn't handle a woman of your substance. I, however, am a man who appreciates every single inch of you." He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that was fiercely possessive and undeniably adoring. It tasted of expensive bourbon victory and the promise of a dark, magnificent future. Lily wrapped her arms around the mob boss's neck, kissing him back with all the passion and fire she had been forced to suppress for years. Bradford Carter had tried to bury her under the weight of his insecurities. Instead, he had only managed to introduce her to the man who would help her conquer the city. The game was over. The king was dead, and the queen had finally taken her rightful throne. Did Lily's ultimate revenge give you absolute chills? There is truly nothing more powerful than a woman who knows her own worth, especially when she has the city's most dangerous man backing her play. If you loved this thrilling story of karma and mafia romance, please smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their power, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our next dramatic twist today.